that has been always one of my biggest fascinations, because if these things are sighted all around our nuclear sites on land, what the hell are they doing with the submarines underwater that are loaded to the gills with nukes and are all throughout the oceans?
Yeah.
So like, if I'm one of these guys who spends months on a nuclear submarine in the ocean, I'm sure these guys have to have some incredible stories. Some of them do, but I've never heard one. I've never heard one story.
Well, there's a reason for that. So first off, it's interesting. Let's just look at the data. A lot of these events have happened around nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, right? Theodore Roosevelt, Nimitz.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of activity there. And I have had one report from an officer who was on a boomer, some ballistic missile submarine in the North Atlantic, who observed a contact. I've shared this before, but really quickly, it had the characteristics of basically a Russian torpedo in terms of closing fast and at a high rate of speed and coming at the submarine.
Right.
And so and in an area they wouldn't have expected it. So they did all the procedures to avoid it. They turned around, they dove deep to nearly crush depth. And when the object got close to them, it stopped. And it kind of went around to their stern and followed them for a while and then rapidly exited the area. And he's not sure what to make of that, but there shouldn't have been anything there because it was in the North Atlantic during a 40-foot seas.
Right.
And so that's when there's high ambient noise. And
Wow.
nothing could detect them. Those subs are quiet. And when there's really high ambient noise, they're undetectable. So that couldn't have been a Russian torpedo or high-speed submersible that hadn't even been built yet. So there's nothing he could explain it. So, but I've not heard a lot of other reports from submariners because that is such a classified area because it's nuclear security and it's undersea security. And those are the most highly classified programs in the government. And so I've not been able to crack into them. I was tangentially read into some of that, but and so I know about that, but nothing regarding UAP. But if anything about UAP in the water that data resides anywhere, it's in those programs, and they are locked tight.
Yeah, there's this guy who Jesse also interviewed, Harold Malmgren.
Yeah.
Who said to him, the Office of Naval Intelligence has more data on this stuff than anybody.
Well, right. And he referred to I believe the National...
More than the Air Force.
Yeah. National Underwater Reconnaissance Office. Yes. So that's it. I know about them. But again, I've not been able to see that information. He's very credible, and his daughter also served, I think, in the Bush administration and the Reagan administration. Right. And her name is Pippa, and she's terrific too. He was right on. In fact, that's interesting. I've been working on this whole topic of the nuke detonations that brought down some UFOs. And that's what Harold had also talked about.
Right, yes.
And there's a lot of data there too.
So like also a weird thing about being one of those guys on the submarines is like you can't really see it. No, you're relying on radar or how does that work? Well, what other kinds of tools do they have?
Sonar.
So how accurate can you get with something? Like how much can you find out about an object that's around a submarine, but with just the tools that they have available to them?
It's difficult, and you don't want to go active. So active is how you can really characterize how large it is and potentially even its shape, but that's going to reveal your locations. That's something submarines generally don't do.
Going active.
Using active sonar, meaning pinging, sending out a transducer.
So they're making their location available to other subs.
Right. Now you can use that. I did my PhD work on this. You can use an active sonar signal, bounce it off an object, and it comes back, and you can use that just like radar. It's the same principle, but with sound instead of EM energy, to characterize an object, its shape, if it's moving, if it's in its structure, and we have high frequency sonars that do this really well. In fact, we use them to map the seafloor and characterize shipwrecks. NOAA does great work, but again, submarines generally don't want to do that because that reveals their location. So they normally are staying passive, and it's very difficult to characterize an object passive because of you're only hearing the sound they emit, which is either from engineering or flow noise around the hull of the vessel or vehicle.
That incident you were just explaining to me where they thought it was a Russian torpedo, did they go active there?
No, no.
Whoa.
So they were just listening, and they dived in.
They dove super deep though.
Yeah.
And they thought they were getting
dangerously
chased.
so. They were convinced they were going to get hit. They were doing all the things to prepare for getting hit and doing the damage control necessary. Yeah, because they'd never seen anything like this, and they had trained for Russian torpedo attacks. This was everything like it. So he called me up after I went public on this information, because he said, I just got to tell you about this experience.
Wow.
So we stay in touch. There was another one I think I shared about it also, where someone has called me up and said, hey, I was one of these acoustic intelligence specialists, and we were on one of these ships that does this. They look for enemy submarines by doing two things. They first send out it's a high energy active pulse, and then they listen in low frequency. It's low frequency active, they call it. So high energy, low frequency pulse, long range, and it'll always get a bounce off a submarine. And that's how you find them. And then what you do is you listen passively to characterize the type of contact. So every type of adversary platform, whether it be a Russian submarine or a Chinese submarine, we know their signature. We know how, and it's by the hull, the actual hull number. We know they sound like the screws, the engineering equipment, the flow noise.
Wow,
it's pretty good. It's kind of like your fingerprints acoustically. That's some of the most classified information out there. Because we can't, if we reveal that, we reveal our sources, the people who found this information, and that would get them killed. But that's how we in the field know, that's the Russian whatever. And so that's what we've done. The whole Cold War was built on that. Some of Blind Man's Bluff is about that.
Oh,
but ultimately,
really?
this guy shared with me that he was out there in Japan in the, I forgot, the 2000s, and they found twice a really loud hit when they went active, and they switched on to passive. And this is what they do. Every time they'll get a passive hit, and they know, okay, it was either exercise they did on one of our subs, or they're out there listening for Chinese. It's one of theirs. And they had nothing. There's no passive hit. But they had a super loud active hit. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
It means there was something big in the water moving, because it wasn't there later, and it had no engineering components making noise. What the fuck is that?
And then it was gone.
It was in the water column. So whales don't do this, by the way. They're soft. They don't reflect sound pulses at that kind of amplitude or that source level. So it's again, these are people who had anomalous observations and experiences, and after I testified, they just wanted to call me and say, hey, I saw this. And in fact, non-underwater, but very cool. After my last testimony, probably one of the neatest encounters or eyewitness encounters I had was this. I went and gave a talk. I always say yes to anybody, any university who wants me to talk about this topic, because that's how we're gonna turn the tide. It's the next generation who are not so stigmatized about this. So any university I went to Yale. They have a UFO society, and I give a talk, and this guy comes down, he's getting his graduate degree, and he goes, hey, I want to tell you a story. Okay. He said, I was a Navy air crew on a SH-60 Seahawk helicopter flying off the Dwight D. Eisenhower in 2021. And he said, a lot of the guys had filmed on forward-looking infrared UAP. In fact, they had a folder on their secret drive, and they called it range foulers. And this is a funny term, because it's so the term in the Navy for anything not right, like a fouled anchor, then you use that for everything. Okay,
right.
Foul the range, right? Like a fouled anchor. And what's fouling the range? UFOs. So they had this whole file on all these UFO videos they had taken, and they kind of used that name as a sort of joke, but ultimately they were keeping track of this stuff. And so everybody knew about it, but no one talked about it in the ready room. The skipper said, hey, we're not. We all know it exists. We're just going to live with it. No one really is asking us to report it. And so, but then there was a point in 2021 where the Joint Chiefs, based on pressure from Congress, directed everyone to start reporting. So that's what they started doing, collecting the videos, sharing them with the intelligence officer, with DIA. And he said one night he was there was going to be a drill to do a man overboard, and that's where they normally, off a helicopter carrier, you don't launch a boat. You launch a helicopter. It's a lot safer and easier. It's hard to launch.
Really?
Yeah. You don't launch a boat off a helicopter, because the flight deck is something like 60 feet off the water line. So that's the MO. You launch a helicopter to recover the man overboard.
Okay.
So this was his job. He was a crew chief, and he thought there was going to be an exercise. Well, he got woken up one night, and they didn't say it was an exercise. So he thought, oh my God, it's a real world event. What had happened is he's waiting to get the plane ready, and one of the pilots had some NVGs, and he asked him, what's going on? He goes, put these on. Look up there.
Night vision goggles?
Yeah, night vision goggles. Look up there. And he saw flying over the character, really just slowly moving laterally, a metallic sphere about the size of a smart car. Just moving slowly, like the Mosul orb, like that, but at night. And everyone was tracking it. Basically, it was in the middle of the strike group, and everybody was basically saying, what the heck is that? So they launched the helo to get video of it. And his crew chief has taken video of this thing, and it's just moving slowly. There's no signs of propulsion or flight control surfaces, it's just a sphere. And then after a time, it did what all these UFOs do. It just accelerated instantaneously and went over the horizon.
Wow.
And he said, not only did that happen a lot, he said that the guys in this other squadron that embarked on the Gerald Ford, the other carrier that deployed after them, happened all the time too. So the Navy is sitting on a trove of UFO data, videos, just as you said ONI is. I mean, these are all sources coming to me saying it's all there and it's all real.